All right, so here we are again. My name is Shaun Carvalho. I'm sitting here with two other fine young men.
I don't know about the young. I'm Jason Edic with Lee Kennedy Company. A fine young man.
Yeah, Jamie Evans with Turner Construction.
Fine young man.
Fine young man.
Seasoned old man.
Seasoned, fine. So today we've got an unusual topic. It's a safety geek topic for sure. So last couple weeks we've been talking amongst a few of us, some that aren't here, but the three of us decided we'd come and talk about this topic on the podcast. And really two questions come to mind. Within an organization, where is safety most effective? So where does the safety department, who owns safety within an organization? That's kind of one part of the conversation we're going to have to hear today. And then who ultimately owns safety in construction?
You mean on a project site or overall company-wide?
It's kind of two different ways. Yeah, both. Yeah. So where do you guys want to start with this?
See, you said it's a safety geek thing. I think this kind of topic would be good for company executives, business owners, mid-sized business owners, people who are considering if they're building a safety program or restructuring a safety program, where does it belong structurally in the organization? Who does it report to? So I think it's not just safety people. We might get one or two company executives that actually listen to this damn podcast.
Yeah, I agree, Jason. I think it's a part of your strategy on how the company organizational structure is, and it's pretty important. I've seen it at 24 years with Turner. I've seen how it's evolved from where we reported to for several years to where we report to today, and seen the benefit of just the different organizational shift and how that cascades ownership throughout the company. So, for instance, for us, we used to report to risk management, which was insurance, the head people that bought our insurance, procured our insurance, ran our CSIP jobs or negotiated those, and then also handled all GL and workers' comp claim litigations. So in that model, the program was driven from, hey, how do we pay the least amount of money or protect ourselves in the event of a loss? So one example that actually drove me nuts when I was in the field, it was when we had this policy that came out that said, hey, we want you to make every worker sign at the end of the day that they didn't hurt themselves today before they leave. And that came from a risk management strategy lens to say, hey, look, they signed here, so obviously if they reported something late, we have this, and hopefully now we don't have to pay any workers' comp claims.
Evidence.
And exactly. So when that actually, quite frankly, it was hard to do my job being in the field, and also it just it drove me nuts because I didn't feel that I didn't feel our program should be written and drafted by lawyers. It should be written and drafted by builders putting the work in place. So that was my perspective, and we underwent a shift probably maybe in 2018, maybe a little bit before that, where we went from reporting to risk management to reporting to operations, and I felt that was way more inclusive, and it's helped us drive better work and more operational ownership from my perspective anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, so that's great with the Turner experience over the last 24 years. And I think the three of us, in our companies, I mean, I've been at Shaun for 21, so kind of limited there. But in our interactions with other people, and Jason, you've got a different background in addition to Lee Kennedy. You've worked at several other places too, including on the owner side. And so you've got exposure to a lot of different companies, but our interactions, with our personal interactions, and then those that we have, with friends in the industry, and understanding their experiences and what works well for different companies and what's a struggle, I think we all have some pretty good experience with. And so, Jamie, talking about your experience, where you reported up through risk management, almost is like the antithesis of what we want this podcast to be about, which is all about the trades. And in that case there, it's all about the company protecting themselves. Very little to do with protecting the trades. And I'll get to, how we kind of manage safety at Shaun, where it lives within the organization. But interesting enough, what's your role at Lee Kennedy?
risk management.
And who will oversee safety?
It's funny. I honestly, until I sit down and think about this during a podcast, I haven't reflected all that deeply on the transition that I've been a part of, that I've seen. And in fact, I'll go back to what you had said about me working on the owner side. I worked for Harvard University for a few years, and I got to work with every single general contractor and trade in the Boston area. And when I say every single, I mean, you can't name a general contractor that I did not work with at Harvard. They all come through Harvard at some point or another. So I got some great exposure. And I ended up leaving Harvard and going to one of the companies that I worked with solely because they were different. They were very, very different. They were a small organization. They weren't all that sophisticated. I'm talking about Lee Kennedy here at the time. I wouldn't say they were all that sophisticated in terms of a program, but operationally, they were very successful because they truly did care about the trades. They cared about the work product. And when you walked onto any one of their project sites, you could tell who owned safety. It was the project team. They owned safety. And at the time, looking back now, it's pretty clear that safety reported to operations. And then I came in the door at Lee Kennedy, and I reported to operations for 5 or 6 years. And we were growing as a company. So we said, you know what, we may need to have a dedicated risk management role. Somebody to take a look at the insurance and the contracts and the claims. Somebody dedicated to that. And Jason, we think that safety fits under that risk management umbrella. And I just went, that sounds awesome structurally. Yeah. Makes total sense. And now looking back on it, if I'm being quite honest, and we're having these discussions internally right now, we've lost a level of ownership in safety specifically by putting safety under risk management and not reporting directly to operations. We work with operations pretty closely, like any other company, but it's amazing just what the reporting structure can add to or detract from, depending on which model you go.
Well, it's really interesting, just as far as you acknowledging that as a safety guy, that transition into like a risk management role, and reflecting back, like, so you're in the field a lot. You certainly came from the field. You understand it, and then you take on this risk management role, and you're saying even at that, with your experience and love of the field, to say it shifted a little bit.
Yeah, I was not as successful as I wanted to be in bridging that gap.
Yeah,
or continuing to allow the projects to maintain that level of ownership, like they did when I first got there. We're trying to get it back now, and it's definitely part of the structure that either detracts or contributes to that ownership. In our case, I've seen it. I don't want to say I've seen it wane, because we're still a very, very strong company when it comes to safety. Not saying we're perfect. We make mistakes and decisions like every other company out there. But I've seen that ownership not necessarily take a backseat, but it's not at the forefront where it used to be. And when I say forefront, I'm talking about the center of our universe, which are the projects. That's what makes our money. That's what keeps us going as a company. And for them to have that ownership at the project level, and even as far as corporate initiatives, a lot of that came from the projects back in the day. Like we've lost something there. We have to get it back. So yeah, I've seen it both sides. Same as yours, except Jamie, you Turner very intentionally went from the risk management into operations to try and gain some of that ownership back. And we went the opposite. We went from operations into risk management. So
yeah, I think we recognized that if we were going to reach our goals or improve, that we had to drive our team's behavior and priority, and that wasn't going to be driven from the risk management entity that's not in their direct reporting line. So I think one of the things I've seen from operations owning it, and we've talked about it for now several years, we're not there. We got a long way to go. But how our leadership now goes out and actions when there's something wrong, whether it's a cleanliness, whether it's a PPE issue, whether it's a coordination, whatever that is, if there is a near miss or an accident, what I see now from that is leadership's now has the appreciation that it has to come from them. And at the SVP level, VP level, operations leadership level, they they cannot call the safety person. They've just got to drive it and call it out at whoever that assistant super is or engineer in charge that was coordinating that work. And for us, I'm seeing that more consistent now. And I think it took a while for that group to realize that that's their role. It has to be them. And it took, I think, it's part of their coaching now is like, because it's owned, safety's owned at the EVP level in our organization, all the SVPs report to that person. Now that's trickled down and it's kind of cascading down through ops, which has been a real promising sign for us. Still a lot of work to do, but you can definitely see the support now is much different, and because everybody's actioning it. So you can see the safety person now is not running around managing logistics or chasing PPE as much, right? They're more advising. It's giving them more space for passion projects, for getting ahead on musculoskeletal and different things, ergonomics that we know are that are an issue, but they couldn't quite get to because they were so wrapped around the axle of compliance and maybe, you know, the Roadrunner Wile E. Coyote show with the superintendents, right? So that's really in the process of change for us. So it's good.
That's interesting though. So you're talking like significant change from top down. So what was the driver for those SVPs to want to drive that level of engagement from themselves, but go out and do those lessons learned and those fixes on the site? Like that doesn't happen by accident.
No, I think it was, well, we're a big organization, and part of that growth and to continue to grow, we were playing in, you got to know the game you're playing, right? The rules of the game you're playing in. And when we started working for more sophisticated companies, and then when you looked at the markets that are available in the future, which is all the advanced technologies and those types of things, you got to execute safety really, really well. There is no, like they're talking recordable rates of, 0.5, right? This is beyond zero type of cultures. And we were, to be honest with you, we were called out in probably 2018 when we were on some projects and the owners looked at us and said, you're not safe enough to be here. And it was a shock because we've been told we're the best. Yeah. Or we think, it's like, what do you mean? We're great. What do you mean? We're always told how great we are. So that was a big wake up call. I think Peter Davern, not to speak for him, but he took that very personally and drove to say, hey, we need to improve. And the only way we improve is if I'm personally involved here and I'm personally driving it, which he has done. So it's been good. It's been good. And he walks the talk and makes sure we have all the resources. Huge on taking away any excuses and providing the right amenities and worker experience. I think his philosophy, again, not to talk for Peter, but you have to have all this infrastructure in place if you want to get to the level of accident, deletion of accidents that you want. You're not going to do it with, without worker amenities, the proper bathrooms, the right environment, respectful workplace, all those things. So he is consistent with it, and he's been consistent for several years. And now, because of that, it's opened up, I would probably say, several $1 billion worth of work for us a year that we do now that we weren't doing before, of growth, and even more to come in the future. So, just all from those shifting priorities and then operations, I guess, owning it.
And that's, for you guys, that's been the same executive leadership group for quite a while at Turner, right?
100%.
Peter.
100%. Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
Peter was in that role when I was there.
Yep. Yeah, he's been there a while. Started as a field engineer here in Boston. But so it goes to show like people have to adapt.
Yeah.
Have to change. And there's not a program or a policy that you can put in place. It's really about behavior for us. So hence operations, owning safety. It's driving behavior and priority of our people putting the work in place, which means at the point of work, they are focused on, yes, you're going to come in here and put this window in, but where's the plan? How are you going to do it? How are you going to tie off ideally? And that's, again, we got a lot of baggage to clean up, and we got to train our people better and all those things. But I feel that it's got to be driven by operations and safety. And part of it is a little bit of ego, because Doug LaPlante, he's on this show, and we both been here a long time, 20 plus years at Turner, and we wanted to own it all. And shit, if someone else wasn't, or I had to get the ops people, I wasn't doing my job. And there was a little bit of letting that go and being able to ask for help too, which that took a lot of years too for both of us, I think, to be able to ask operations.
Yeah, it's Ford figured out by the time you retire. Can't be that far off for you.
and shifting that out to some other people, some new pros coming in, new safety pros coming in, or like you said, the one or two executives that might be listening to this podcast. Who knows? Maybe not. I think you're a little high on that, but I think that's a great story of change for Turner. And it's funny. I talked to a friend of mine that took on a new role as a president of a small construction firm in California. I talked to him Friday, and he was telling me how safety's good. It's valued at the organization, but he wants to take it to new heights. And so he is, bringing in his field staff on a quarterly basis now, and he's got the next one coming up. And he said, I'm going to lead the lessons learned talk around safety, and I want to lead that. I've got a consultant that's helping me write some stuff, but ultimately I'm going to conduct the next several safety trainings for the organization. I said, wow, as president, owning that's going to change the culture quite a bit. But he knows the value of it. It's interesting that it sounds like you guys kind of learned that almost by necessity, right? Yet you realize like 0.5 isn't good enough. We need to improve. We can't rely just on the safety team to help make that change. This has to be organizationally done. So there was a value that your leadership felt and started to drive throughout the organization, just like my friend in California. And some CEOs will get that. Unfortunately, we've all heard the stories, right? You killed my dad, you killed my mom because you weren't paying attention. And to learn that way is horrific, right? None of us want to learn that way. And I think we work for some incredible companies and incredible CEOs that don't want to ever get that knock at the door. So to hear it kind of Turner pivoted in a way that it didn't take that knock on the door or that pull on the sleeve to say, why did you do this? Why didn't you do that? That's pretty impressive.
It is. It is, especially when you consider the size of Turner. So for a company, I don't know how many billions Turner is now, but it's up there. It's in the top 5 internationally, right? For construction companies, top 1 or 2 usually.
Yeah, it's
right?
pretty large.
To pivot anything, to roll out a new piece of software for a timesheet in an organization like Turner, never mind culturally changing it midstream. I mean, really, while you guys are, on top of the world as far as construction goes, that is no easy task. It's not.
Well, they've had a base for a while, but it's just, you can't sit on your laurels, right? And
it's a big pivot, though. You're taking that from risk management and putting it back into operations, where originally it came from. Safety was a part of operations. I don't care what kind of company you run. Originally, that was part of operations, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have a 12-person shop that has a risk management department or is running CSIPs. Turner started the same way. Started in operations, moved into risk management.
No, it's funny. Some of our best jobs are actually those SPD jobs where there isn't a safety person on. The super owns it all. Yep. And they completely crush it. And you go in, and it's because they own it. They know they own it. And those are some of our cleanest, best jobs to walk, to be honest with you, best performing.
Yeah. I think our experience at Shaun is a little different in that similar to Lee Kennedy, where we started a risk management department after kind of safety was already established within the organization. Yep. But prior to safety being even established, because there's tons of companies out there that are small that don't have safety resources. And Shaun was in that boat a while ago, and then so operations owned it. Obviously, somebody had to manage it. But this is back in the '90s, so things weren't done quite the same that they are today.
Nope.
And then so we had safety for a while, and then we got to a size we felt like we needed a risk management team, but that sat really outside of safety and operations. They sat more like with the internal side, with the worrying about the legal side of it, the accounting side of it, the financials. So they've always stood there, but as a direct partner with safety. And I think that partnership, it lasts through today. But it's a really really effective way to have a program. And both kind of departments report up through different channels. Really, risk management reports up through legal, and safety at Shaun reports up through operations.
This is awesome. What you can't see on the podcast is Joe Kelly crawling under the cameras. I think you just got an ass shot.
Cat
the third camera.
Very cat-like.
Yeah, totally. You've been doing yoga, brother. So who does safety? What is that chain in Shaun?
Yeah, so it's up through the chief operating officer. So COO oversees all operations within the organization. So everything construction facing, right? So that excludes accounting, finance, IT, marketing, right? That's more internal operations.
Yep.
So COO really oversees everything construction related. So we report up to COO and then CEO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So safety reports directly to COO.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. We've known some people over time that don't always like that reporting structure because it's not high enough in the organization. And I mean, I don't know how oftentimes you guys are asked by clients, but who does safety report to? And a lot of times the clients want to hear to the CEO. Challenge with that is CEOs are busy. They're busy people. They're designing strategy and vision for the organization and driving culture. And you almost need like another layer down if somebody actually understands the day-to-day, the running of the organization. Not to say that Wes, our CEO, doesn't. He does. Great job. But the COO really is responsible for that. So if you want to have positive change and positive things going on within the organization, I think it's an important role to report into.
I agree. We've got a little bit of it's a similar petri dish to Turner. Meaning what hasn't changed in the past 12 or 15 years is our executive leadership team. It is the exact same team that we had when I walked in the door 12 years ago. And yet we seem to have lost a little bit of ownership at the project level. Now, is part of that like this increased burden on the project staff? Meaning all the technology, all those ancillary requirements that you have to fulfill that supers and PMs didn't have as a burden 5, 10, 15 years ago. Is that part of it? Or is it the fact that we've added another layer in? So we've gone from an organization where safety reports directly to the vice president of construction, basically the COO of Shaun, and that person reports to the CEO, and we've added another layer. So right now, safety reports to risk management reports to both the CFO and the VP of construction. It's just we've added another layer. So have we detracted or gotten rid of some of that ownership at the project level because we inserted that other layer? So when I say we're trying to figure out, we're actively as an organization trying to figure out right now what that reporting structure is and what the value could be if we, like Jamie had said, pivot.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important to understand from the structure of the organization, right? And you're dealing with it now. Jamie's dealt with it. I think, Shaun, we've been kind of aligned with operations for the most part all along. But you said something interesting there about how does that translate down or out to the project level, and then who owns safety there. Jamie, you gave an example of some of your I think your special projects where you don't have dedicated safety on site. The superintendent then owns it. We have jobs that are mixed. Sometimes we have safety people on site full time, and then other times they're a resource. When it relates to a job site level, besides saying everybody, because everybody owns their own safety, who is responsible for establishing that program, that culture, and driving safety? Ultimately, somebody's got to be accountable for it. What are your thoughts on that?
You looking for a title on a project?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
Superintendent.
I would say the project executive. The project exec, in our structure anyway, has the relationship with the client. The superintendent, the project manager are reporting up to that project exec, maybe the safety person. Mm-hmm. But the buck stops there, in my view.
In the ultimate world of accountability, I agree with you. In the reality that I live in, I don't agree with you, because I have given this a lot of thought lately. Because we have SOPs, we got things that we ask people to do. And you throw a lot out there, you get some feedback, you work with people, establishing what they might be. I asked you for what Lee Kennedy's were last year, and we threw a lot out on people. And as I kind of thought about it, like through right now, it's like who ultimately owns it? We want the trades to own it, and we're trying to put a little bit more on subcontractor management to help provide the necessary resources for their people on the jobs. I think over time we've taken a lot of that on ourselves, and it's not our job. It's the employer. It's their job to own that. So how do we push a little bit more on them? But who's on the job every day? And ultimately, I'm going to say the superintendent, because the superintendent, I think, can drive the best culture on the job, good and bad.
Agree.
They're there every day. They're creating the schedule. They're coordinating the trades. They're communicating with the leaders on the site, hopefully with other people on, everybody on the site. They are responsible ultimately for making sure that the facilities are clean and maintained in a workmanlike manner. They're responsible for all of that. And so I tend to think if you want a solid safety culture with good engagement and people are feeling groovy on the site, it has to be the superintendent. And that's a shift from what I used to think.
Now, I'll get corny for a second and tell you that the super can't do that without a pretty big support structure. In fact, if you asked our product execs and our VPs who owns safety on their projects, they would say them. To your point, the buck stops here. But from a day-to-day cultural impact, the super, to me, has always had the largest impact at the project level. They are the face of the general contractor to every trade person out there, and in a lot of ways the client as well. So I tend to agree with you from a realistic standpoint, because I've seen it go both ways. We have some superintendents that understand that, accept it, and run with it. Mm-hmm. It's their ball. In fact, I've had superintendents talk to me and say, I want the safety professional on the job to understand that he works for me on this job. He's not working for you. He might go to your monthly meeting or whatever the hell you're doing, but he works for me on this job. No different than, this coordinator, the VDC. They're part of my support structure. I ask them to do specific things, but I own this program and I need X, Y, and Z out of them. And I love hearing that from superintendents. Yep, you got it. That's the way it should be. To me, that's the way it should be. I always looked at it. When I was a product safety manager, I worked for the superintendent. I didn't work for, at the time, Ed DeAngelis, or we had those meetings, and we were a little bit of a separate department, right? But I worked for the super. I worked for the Charlie Moores and the Jack Dawsons of the world. Is he still going, by the way, Jack Dawson?
Yes, he is. He just gets younger and younger every day, Jack.
Tell him to return my phone call, because I called you a couple of weeks ago about something, Jack.
I'll make sure. He's been busy, but
sure he is.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
One of the best builders in Boston, for sure. Yeah, or in New England, I would say. Just a little plug for Jack there.
Jamie, you talked a little while ago about maybe that ego of safety and wanting to own it. That the program itself, and when the SVPs started coming in and using safety more as a resource and an expert to help guide versus hold people accountable and drive. I think that's a tricky one. And you're talking about safety working for the superintendent. We agree at Shaun, but we say that. And at the same time, safety organizationally and on a project level does fall outside of that chain of command very intentionally. So because people get conflicted from time to time, right?
I wanted to talk about that because that's one of the big changes in this industry that I've seen for a long time. When I started in construction, 99 or 2000, safety was a separate department within the company, simply to avoid that potential conflict of interest. Meaning, hey, the super may tell you to ignore something, or no, we're making this decision, and you just keep your mouth shut and you go, all right, I guess that's what you're telling me to do. But I always have this other resource behind me that I can say, hey, Ed, this, I was asked not to do this. What do you think, right? So that's why it was separated. And I have to say that the culture in construction overall, in my eyes, has changed drastically enough to where this whole idea of do the right thing, at every level is much more prevalent today than it ever was. I rarely see a conflict of interest where a super is saying, or anybody at any level saying, no, we're not going to do it like this. You just go to the other side of the site for about 20 minutes and we'll take care of this. I just don't hear that stuff anymore, or at least not as much as I used to. So to me, that the idea that conflict has not disappeared, but it's definitely decreased very substantially over time. So I don't see it existing the way that it used to.
Yeah.
That's why I'd like to report to the superintendent and PM.
Yeah, I think I agree that it's not the same it used to be. We still see conversations from time to time. And, at the end of the day, one thing that, I had this conversation the other day and somebody said, well, I need to be the mediator. No, you don't. We're all on the same team. That's what you're not understanding here. We all need to get to the same point. Safe, effective, deliver the product. That's what needs to happen. So we don't need a mediator to get us there. We need to drop our egos and figure out what's the best, safest path. And I think the safest path people were forgetting while wanting to take some risk. And it just didn't make sense to take some of the risk. So it still happens. And it can happen on a project level, and it can happen within leadership too, right? So having safety, as a resource is excellent. Having safety, drive some programs, make some changes, collaborate, very important. In absence of firm, strong leadership that I think all three of our firms have, because not everybody listening will have that support, it could be a conflict, right? So we know the companies that are out there that are still finding their way into this century with safety. And so having safety as a standalone, I think still is important on a job site level and organizationally for those reasons.
You have to find that balance, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if the project team is looking at the safety professional, the safety manager on the project as that resource to the project, they're not separate. They're part of the team, right? Yeah. If they're looking at that person as part of that team and that resource, that safety professional has to establish a level of trust with that team too. Meaning, if I'm speaking plain English, that safety person is not running to the director of EH&S or the VP of risk management saying, "Hey, this super told me to do this." The intent is you're gonna keep it in-house as much as possible and sort the problem until it becomes an issue, and then you're raising your hand. We still see some of that today.
Yeah,
but the system works. The system works. That person, that safety professional, has checks and balances behind them as a sounding board and as I guess more of a resource than anything else. It's there for a reason.
Yeah, you bring up a really great point. Of
bullshit.
Is the safety person trying to police and implement the policies, procedures that you have in place, or are they teaching people about them and then how to go implement, or are they policing them? So pre-task planning, morning huddles, maybe ladder tags, these processes that you have that maybe you execute well or you don't. In a lot of areas, I'll see the safety persons trying to drive that, where they're maybe reporting to a superintendent or not. But when we have a PX that takes ownership of those policies, procedures, and is in alignment, we see that there's less resistance from my perspective in the field by the leadership, and it drives that behavior to say, this is how this process goes. Let's get with Jason. Let's onboard everybody. Let's make sure the staff knows how to do it. If we have a gap, let's bring them back in and retrain them, versus when it's just maybe driven at the site level. So that PX to me, the construction executive, they're accountable, maybe not responsible, but accountable, right? To ensure like the programs, the policies are in place and they're measured, and then they call out. And
they're also the glue at a higher level across more of the organization, those PXs.
Yeah, and it's a great way to get consistency. It's a smaller group typically than all your supers. So if you can get that group aligned, that'll hopefully drive some standardization between jobs.
So I can buy that about being accountable, but maybe not responsible. Because again, back to the example I gave earlier, just who was on site every day. And I mean, the PX might be there, but are they running those orientations or issuing those hardware permits? Probably not. We
Yeah.
have somebody else that's doing that, right? So it's difficult for them to own all of that. And I get back to the superintendent.
Yeah, it's
And
fun.
in that case, it is, I would agree, the super for the day-to-day implementation. And
Yeah.
But who's
the ones that are responsible?
Who's setting that table though early on? I mean, that is that account exec. That is that project executive. Right?
And
They're the ones that have that.
For us, a lot of times it's our VP of construction. This is a silly example, but our VP of construction, I'll call him out by name, Don Cook. The guy lives in the field. We were talking about this earlier. He's not a house cat. He lives on the projects, and his role is just checks and balances. Doesn't matter what it is. Quality, schedule, you pick any topic. Do we have everything that we need to have procured on the project procured? Is the material at the job right now, or is it scheduled to be at the job? So anything and everything falls under his umbrella when it comes to constructability and schedule. And when it comes to safety, he will. He does it all the time, and it drives people nuts. I love it. It's super impactful. He will walk a job. He'll take a picture of an excavation that's not sloped right, or there's some issue with it, or it doesn't have a ladder or something. It doesn't matter what the safety issue is. He'll just text that picture to the superintendent, the lead superintendent of the project, with WTF. The superintendents. Now, a lot of times it rolls downhill. The super's hey, I'm tied up in meetings. Hey, safety guy, I'm tied up in meetings. You got to help me with this stuff. This is the stuff that you're supposed to be doing. Help me with this. I'm responsible for it. But the pressure is then on that lead superintendent. He is the person responsible for it. He's not texting the safety person. He's texting the lead super and saying, WTF.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We see that
Creates a
too,
culture.
I think, from the VP level. I'm very fortunate. You all know Maureen Kirkpatrick, and I worked with Maureen for many years, and she's our operations manager, VP, and
Best.
incredible.
She really is.
Incredibly consistent, compassionate, drives the program in a way that, hey, this is our, not that it's hey, here's our policy, not following policy, is we need to make sure that we do this so no one gets hurt. And she's just so consistent. But what's unbelievably helpful is when she walks a project, when we start a new initiative like the helmets, and we had to get everybody to get the helmets. That was it. We were having no more head injuries with a traditional hard hat. And then it was hey, we've got to get all these things buckled. And she's out there on the front line every time, walking up to 10, 20, 30, 40 people when she goes to walk the job in an operations review meeting. And in front of the staff, she's right out in front of them, leading the way, correcting things. And then she's demanding, why are you guys not correcting this? You need to do that. So I think if there is any executives out there trying to figure out, hey, how do I get to best in class in safety? I would say think of that model with Maureen and just you live it every day. Sometimes it's not a strategy on paper or a new policy. It's just how you behave and how people see you. And that cascades down. So
She's instilling accountability in her staff.
Yep.
I mean, that's a demonstration of commitment.
Yeah.
It's not a commitment to it. It's easy to say commitment, but that's a demonstration of commitment.
Yeah, and holding herself accountable to it, and so we're just incredibly fortunate there with just the type of people we have in there, and then willingness to keep getting better. So it's good too.
That's great. So I guess we're kind of getting close to the end here. So I think we talked at length about really where does safety live, both from a project level up through an organization. Some pretty good examples of kind of our three firms of how that rolls out. Ultimately, I think we've got consensus from Jamie now. He'll agree that superintendent owns safety on every job.
We had some decisions made today, right? So it's operations is where safety belongs.
100%.
And Kennedy's moving in that direction.
So moving back to that direction.
Going back to that direction. But all kidding aside, it sounds like when safety is owned from leadership, ideally at the CEO level, pushing all the way down, you're going to get more buy-in. Whether it's your VP of operations texting your lead superintendent saying WTF, fix, and that person either fixing it or going pushing that to somebody else because they're tied up to fix something that started at the top. So when safety starts at the top, and safety department, safety professionals can be used as a resource to help that's where you probably get the most bang for the buck.
100%. Yep.
Can I have one final note?
One final note.
Got nothing to do with the topic. We're supposed to have a.
We may edit this out.
No, we're not. We won't edit this out. I hope we don't edit it out. It's for one person and their ears. We were supposed to have a fourth person in here today, Bob Kunz. And Bob unfortunately lost a very close family member. And Bob, we wish you were here. We understand why you're not. And you got a lot of friends thinking about you out there, pal.
God bless you, Bob.
Yep.
God bless you, Bob.